And we're back. Testing, make sure everyone can hear us loud and clear. Give us those ones if y'all can hear us.
Mic check, mic check. Back in the building.
Mic check. Windy mic check.
All right, cool. So, where were we at before I had my power outage? Oh boy, for a second I thought I was on the BIE list, man. Thought they was coming to bust through the door. I know, horrible joke.
Hold up. Wait a minute. Hold up. Hold up.
Alright, so it's all good. We're good now. 501c29. So we were talking about the qualified non-profit health insurance insurers. So these non-profits were put into place because of lobbying by other 501(4)s, 501c5s, 501c6s. So two of the stipulations to ensure that this doesn't spawn another 501c5, 4, or 6 is that they cannot belong, or the majority of. So you got to pay attention to the way they word stuff too. You know substantial part of the organization's activities. So it doesn't say anything about the members. It just says no substantial part of the organization's activities involves attempts to influence legislation, and no organization does not participate to or intervene in political campaigns. The organization as a whole, but the members of the organization are not prevented from doing so. So the organization itself cannot be involved in politics or campaigns or legislation, but it does not prevent members from the organizations from participating in politics. So then you have, let me see, I'm trying to pull up another link in reference to it before we move on to the next one. Let's see. It's not going to let me pull it up. All right. So the 501c29 is exclusively and specifically for this non-profit health insurance issuers. So if you fall under these criteria, you too can have your own qualified non-profit health insurance issuers. And they show you how to do it. Bones, is there anything that you want to add or anything you want to say about that 501c29 before we move on?
No, I'm just taking notes. I know I can start. We can start our own.
This is true.
And it's legal. Don't got to worry about nobody kicking in no dough.
Not at all. All right.
It's just amazing how people tell you stay away from this. But if you take the time out and look into it, you realize this is how they're benefiting.
Yeah, it's exactly how they benefit. Grand Rising, Black Indian immigrated.
Peace. Glad you caught that cap this rising.
Yeah, we're just finishing up on the 501c29, and we're going to be moving into other tax-exempt organizations. Let me put the link in the chat so y'all can follow along. Copy. So far we've covered everything from the 501c1 to the 501c29. So that's 29 tax-exempt 501Cs. And that's everything from your electric companies, to your banks, to your cemeteries, to your insurance companies, to your title holding companies, to your professional sports teams. I mean, you name it, you could pretty much, there is pretty much a nonprofit. Not to forget the military, the United States Armed Services, which are
All,
501c19. Go ahead.
yeah, I was just saying, yeah, all branches of the military.
David Corey said water company. So you can basically
certain religious towns.
Which we're about to get into right now. So that was your 501Cs. You're right, David Corey. You could basically run a whole city off of a nonprofit.
Basically, a whole city is ran off nonprofits.
You don't have to believe me.
It's more than
Do your research. You coming in really choppy, Bones.
It's more than just saying that you can do it. You actually see it every day in your life through the application of your utilities, your municipalities in your city, to the entertainment that you're watching on your television. Yeah. Nonprofits are basically what's running. The government is a nonprofit.
Yep. That's the reason why they have to get rid of all their funds before their fiscal year ends. So now there are some nonprofit entities that have more stringent guidelines. That's because they are being totally funded by the government themselves. A lot of government contracts, because I'm up here in Northern Virginia where there are a lot of government contracts, and they have very stringent rules. And you're right, Alchemy. Government is a nonprofit corporation, though it's still a corporation. A nonprofit, when it says nonprofit is tax exempt, all that is just a stipulation of the IRS code, because you could have a corporation be registered as a nonprofit, and there is nothing in law that indicates that it has to mention it's a nonprofit.
Yeah, we went through that. They don't have to tell you.
So many people are not aware that some of the companies that they work for are actually nonprofits. So let's go ahead and get into these 501Ds. I don't know if y'all knew there was a such thing as a 501D, but there is.
Now you do.
So the 501D are religious or apostolic organizations with the purpose of operating a religious community where the members live a communal life following the tenets and teachings of the organization. The organization's property is owned by each of the individuals in the community, but upon leaving, a member cannot withdraw any of the community's assets. The organization income comes into a community treasury that is used to pay for the organization's operating expenses and supporting the members and the families. Do we know any entities that would fit this criteria right off the hand?
The Amish, Mormons.
Exactly. Isn't there another one? You got the Amish, the Mormons. There's one more.
You got Amish, Mormons, Quakers.
Quakers, that's it. Those are the three more popular ones.
Yeah, then you even, some places, you got full Jehovah's Witness communities, full Jewish communities, full Catholic communities.
And Alchemy says ain't NOI in that category. It's very possible that NOI is in that category.
Yeah, they can. Yeah, they can have properties and stuff under that if that whole area.
TJ say camps.
Yeah, you got like them little religious camps. I know you got a couple of them in Orlando, Holy Land and all that stuff in Orlando.
Yeah, David Corey says they have all the genealogy histories, the Mormons. Yeah, they do. They own a lot of the genealogy sites.
Yep, Chief Alchemy, the whole Jim Jones debacle. That case was something.
So lots in Utah. Free says religious or apostolic. I thought apostolic was part of religion. I'm glad you brought that up, Free, because they got apostolic highlighted. So let's see what Wikipedia says about apostolic. And I'll put the link in the back in the chat so people can read it.
All right, y'all know what that means. Hard hat, double seat belts, steel toe boots, jackhammers coming through. Watch them feet.
So it is listed according to Wikipedia. They say they don't want this out, it keeps buffering. Everything seems clear on my end.
I'm checking the stream health right now.
Yeah. Yeah, David, go ahead and refresh your screen, and you should be pretty cool, pretty good. Cause I got a strong signal over here. So apostolic poverty. This is what they say. Apostolic poverty is a Christian doctrine professed in the 13th century by the newly formed religious orders known as the Mendicant Orders, in direct response to calls for reform in the Roman Catholic Church. In this, these orders attempted to live their lives without ownership of lands or accumulation of money, following the precepts given to the 70 disciples in the Gospel of Luke, and succeeding to varying degrees the ascetic Pope Pt6 II's solution of the investor controversy in his radical concordant of 1111 with the emperor, repudiated by the cardinals, was that the ecclesiastics of the Germans should surrender to the imperial crown their fiefs and secular offices. Pasha proved to be the last of the Georgianist popes. Remember we was talking about Georgius? Gregorianist? Or Georgism or something like that?
Yeah, Geoism, Georgism, yep.
Yeah. So this is another version of that. Gregorianist popes. It says the provocative doctrine was a challenge to the wealth of the church and the concerns about ensuing corruption it brought. Rejection by the hierarchy of the church, it found sympathetic audiences among the disaffected poor of the 12th, 13th, and 14th centuries. The doctrine of the apostolic poverty was condemned as heresy in 1323, but it continued to be a source of debate. One group which was a major proponent of apostolic poverty was the Humiliati, the humble ones. Founded by a wool merchant, they established communities scattered around Italy and France, organized on the principle of a simple way of life for the laity, who shared their goods while remaining in family units. They remained primarily a lay movement and came to reject the authority of hierarchy and the clergy. For this and other reasons, they were later to be declared heretical by the Catholic Church. Now, Grand Rising, you don't want it. Alchemy says Utah is Judah, correct? Heard much Aboriginal lineage out that way. How the hell the Mormons take over? That's a whole. How that happened is a whole other story for another day. Yeah, we wouldn't even have time to even get into that. Like talk about it, we'd get way off track. But there are lots of YouTube channels with a lot of information on that about Utah being Judah. But what I'm seeing from this is that this, if you look at it in its most simplistic form, the apostolic poverty is nothing more than them replacing our ancestors.
Yep.
Because what does it talk about? It talks about living simply, living off the land, not having anything that's, basically getting rid of all of the creature comforts, if you will, of life, and owning nothing. Doesn't that sound like the tenets of our ancestors? Grand Rising, Big Hawk.
Peace, Big Hawk. Yes, they do.
And has it already been proven by numerous sources, including people that are part of this Aboriginal, Indian, melanated, autochthonous movement, that a lot of our lands had churches on them, and then those churches became universities?
You are correct.
So they basically put these institutions on top of our ancestors' property, and then eventually converted these institutions into universities, as they were ushering us out the front, the side doors, and the windows.
And like Chief Alchemy said, turn life into an industry. Industrialize it.
So at the end of the day, this is pretty much one of the ways that they were able to take over, by basically claiming our ancestors' way of life and making it in a religious order.
And then turning us into consumers to keep it going.
That's crazy. So at the end of the day, it further proves what we talked about when it comes to these processes, these doctrines, these governments belong to our ancestors. And I heard somebody talking yesterday about taking back, our music, walking back into the music because we created all the music. And I found it interesting because when things like that are said about, us taking back our music, because there's an artist, and you have to forgive me if I'm mispronouncing his name, or I'm even inaccurate about this genre. What's his name? Little Nas is doing country music or something like that now. So it's okay in some instances for us to reclaim music. It's okay for us to reclaim sports, but it's not okay for us to reclaim our way of life. I'm not understanding. Because don't get it twisted. These governmental instruments were ours, and they are ours. David Corey said, music may be a non-profit organization. I wouldn't be surprised.
No, it's a profit organization, but it works in the hands with non-profit organizations. promotions, releases, distribution.
Just something to think about. It's okay to step back in and reclaim our music, but it's not okay to step back in and reclaim our form of government, our form of voting, our form of activism, our form of taking control and being a part of legislation. That's not okay, but everything else is. That doesn't make any sense to me. Grand Rising, Antonio Baptiste.
They just want to dance, though.
He said that Old Town Road was ours. Facts. So, just something to think about. And that is your 501d, your religious apostolic organization. So then we have I'm sorry, go ahead, Bones.
Sound like them Palatines that was putting up all them churches. Years, huh?
Then we have the 501e, the cooperative hospital service organizations that are organized to provide services for multiple tax-exempt hospitals. That's the title.
Hospital at a tax-exempt hospital. Ain't that something?
You can't make this up. It's a cooperative hospital service organizations that are organized to provide services for multiple tax-exempt hospitals. Mr. TJ says, uh-oh. Doodle Vision says, we claim everything but your name, your governance, your land. Sincerely, Aboriginal Sovereignty Citizens. Yes, these are still 501 listings. Instead of it being 501Cs, they have 501E. So this one is a 501E. The one I read before that was a 501D as in Delta.
Mate, you can post a link to it. Chief Alchemy was looking for the list.
Yeah, I can post it again.
Yeah, we broke it down the prior episodes.
So yeah, we're on 501E. So we're at a point now of talking about the cooperative hospital service organizations that are organized to provide services for multiple tax-exempt hospitals, which is nothing more than a service, an organization that services multiple tax-exempt hospitals, meaning that these hospitals are tax-exempt themselves and they're being serviced by a tax-exempt cooperative. Sounds like an insurance company that has a cooperative or an organization, or a nonprofit tax-exempt bank, credit unions that has a cooperative. If you start to pay attention, it seems like every nonprofit has a nonprofit cooperative that services it.
Yep. And what we learned about nonprofits, they can bring in unlimited amount of funds.
Unlimited amount of donations from organizations and unions.
And if you decide to go political, you can spend up to 49.9%
of your money and activity to influence legislation and voting. And the NFL is a 501c6. So they have political influence. What are they, a $13 billion organization? That's taxes.
NFL? Yeah. But who's the largest donator to the NFL, though?
The Department of Defense, which is another nonprofit entity.
Interesting.
It could be part of the Electoral College, I'm not sure. David Corey said this is why the churches let you out on Sunday and say go support your sports teams.
No, but these entities have influence over the Electoral College.
Yeah, one nonprofit to another. There's a support. The nonprofits are your structures. They're your major structures that level and balance everything out. They balance out your for-profits. They keep your currency flowing.
Working hand in hand.
So that's your 501E. Your 501F is your cooperative service organizations of educational organizations that invest assets contributed by each of the organization's members. What?
Schools, colleges, alumni donations.
I'm gonna see if I can find out an example.
Oh, it's gonna get ugly, relatives.
Let's see. Let's see if I can find out an example. Black Indian immigrator says, Antonio PC says, we dropping double entendres this morning. All right. Let's see if it'll give me an example of one of these organizations or entities. Let's see. Grand Rise and do the vision. We have I sent you a link to the chat, so you can come in when you're ready. So as defined here in definitions.uslegal.com, it says cooperative service organizations of operating educational organizations law and legal definition, the income of which is excluded from taxation under section 115A 26 USCS 115A. Then such organization shall be treated as an organization organized and operated exclusively for charitable purposes. So let me see if it's going to give me an example. Okay, so let's see what we got. Y'all are going to like this. I'm going to put this link in here. This is from a legal website.
Double seatbelt, hard hat, steel toe boots, info dropping. Caution.
It says, it is organized and operated solely to hold, commingle, and collectively invest and reinvest, including arranging for and supervising the performance by independent contractors of investment services related thereto in stocks and securities. The money is contributed thereto by each of the members of such organization and to collect income therefrom and turn over the entire amount thereof less expenses to such members. It is also organized and controlled by one or more of such members. It is comprised solely of members that are organizations described in clauses 2 or 4 of section 107B 1A 26 USSCS, which are exempt from taxation and under subsection, the income of which is excluded from taxation under section 115A 26 USCS. Then such organization shall be treated as an organization organized and operated exclusively for a charitable purpose. So what this means is the cooperative services organizations of operating education organizations are basically an organization that is allowed to hold, commingle, collect, invest, and reinvest funds from independent contractors and investment service related to stocks and securities. And the money is contributed by each of the members of such organization and to collected income, therefore, turn over the entire amount less the expenses to these members. So basically, these are monies that were reinvested by these individuals that are tax exempt, so they can get a return on these investments. So this is an investment and reinvestment tool and mechanism that is tax exempt, that then is turned over less the expenses to these members. So it's a nonprofit investing mechanism for educational organizations. That's basically what it is. It's an investment mechanism that's tax exempt for educational organizations that are nonprofits. Because there are certain nonprofits that are restricted from having their funds reinvested to generate a profit to go back to the organization or go back to the people. Well, this is one of those organizations that does not have that restriction. So hopefully that makes sense. So I put it in there, put the link in the back chat. Due to vision, you're absolutely correct. Commingling funds is not only illegal, but it also has your for-profit entity to be considered a hobby. But since this is a non-profit cooperative services organization that's operating educational organizations' information and assets, they have this written in to where it is legal to hold and commingle and collectively invest and reinvest in stocks and securities. The money is contributed thereto by each of the members of such organizations, and to collect income therefrom and turn over the entire amount thereof, less expenses to such members. So these members can take funds from whatever entity that they have, because it says hold and commingle, invest and reinvest, and put it into these investment tools. And if you know anything about the stock market, if you really want to play like the big boys, you need at least $5 million liquid capital. And what happens is you go into a different category than the average person, and you're receiving a minimum of $20,000 without touching the principal, because what you're doing is you're loaning the stock market money. So basically, that's what this organization is designed to do. And the return is what they're able to redistribute, tax exempt. Antonio Pt6 says margin accounts. Doodle Vision says, so under this 501c, I can designate my YouTube Patreon as a hobby. I don't understand that question, Doodle Vision. You're going to come on the panel and ask that one. Antonio Baptiste says, millionaire day traders do a lot all day. Yeah, if you really understand how the stock market works, this is how you make your money from the stock market. What they teach you otherwise is a slow way to lose your money. But I'm gonna leave that alone. So that was your 501F. Indigenous intelligence says high frequency traders. So that was your 501F. Now we have the 501J. We still under tax-exempt organizations. Oh, David Corey said he said the YouTube Patreon is a hobby. I mean, if your YouTube Patreon is part of your mixed with your personal account, not a business account, yeah, it will be considered as a hobby. So 501J, amateur sports organizations that either conduct national or international sporting competitions or develop amateur athletes for national or international sporting competitions. So what does that sound like? The Olympics? Your AAUs. Yep. The division says U.S. track and field. I mean, there are a lot of amateur sports that will fall in this category. He says, now you speaking my language. I want a high-tech rec center. So yes, a 501J is dealing with amateur sports organizations that either conduct national or international sporting competitions or develop amateur athletes for national or international sporting competitions. Martial arts organizations, exactly, Big Hawk. So now y'all understanding how some of these organizations are getting these funds and setting up these organizations. You ever notice how your Taekwondo, Little League sports, United States Judo Federation, exactly, Big Hawk. Have you ever noticed how some of these Taekwondo organizations that are in our neighborhoods always have 2 or 3 vans sitting outside in the parking lot where they can go pick up the kids, but they never pick up the kids, and you wonder what they do with them? Or is that just me?
Holding that.
Because the parents normally bring the kids, right? And those vans are generally used for what? Taking those kids that pay that extra fee for competition to travel when they're actually competing against other arenas. Something to think about. Yep, tournaments, exactly. He threw the video, said, yep, whole fleet of vans like an Enterprise parking lot. So now you know how this happens. So these are things that we can do for our children. These are things that you could do in your community. Okay? So now you have the 501k. I wonder why it's called K. Daycare centers may qualify as tax exempt under Section 501k. The daycare center must provide child care away from their homes. At least 85% of the children served must be cared for while their parent or guardian is either employed, seeking employment, or a full-time student. Most of the daycare's funding must come from fees received for daycare services. The daycare center must also provide daycare services to the general public. The tax exemption for certain daycare centers was part of the Deficit Reduction Act in 1984. Mikhail Brown said, he says, some of you BS and they're giving you the game. You just can't be scared to get in the ring. Well, that's facts, Mikhail. Oh yeah, do the vision. Daycares do bring in a lot of money because you can't take your children to work with you. So let's look at the Deficit Reduction Act, which spawned all this. Because I can remember when my mother was when she used to do babysitting in the early '80s, and that was a very lucrative business before they nationalized it. Grand Rising, Copper Color Queen.
Peace.
So I'm gonna put the link in there. I just copied it. Hold on, let me put the link in there. I know y'all like, what? Why did he just copy the word and paste it? It makes no sense. There it is. Oh, it's hump day. Yeah, babysitting the original side hustle. That's what my mom used to do. She had like 10 to 15 kids. The Deficit Reduction Act of 1984, also known as DEFRA, was a federal law enacted in the United States in 1984, originally part of the stalled Tax Reform Act of 1983. It was adjusted and reintroduced as the Tax Reform Act of 1984 after passing in the House. It was merged with the Senate version into its final form, collectively known as the Deficit Reduction Act of 1984. It was signed into law by President Ronald Reagan. So it gives you a summary of the provisions. It says the Office of Tax Analysis of the United States Department of the Treasury summarized the tax changes as follows. It repealed Schedule 15% net interest exclusions, a $900 cap, reduced benefits from income averaging, reduced tax benefits from property leased by tax-exempt entities, temporarily extended telephone excise tax through 1987, increased depreciation lives for real property from 15 years to 18 years. Now, the funny thing about that is the Deficit Reduction Act says nothing about starting a daycare. When it talks about the highlights.
Nope.
Just thought I'd put that out there. Michael Robinson says, bet they teach this in the Jewish and white schools for sure. I would dare say that they teach this at your a lot of put it this way, a lot of the immigrants that come in know about this information. They're taught it.
Yeah, they taught us. They bought into the country.
Yeah.
On their way to becoming citizens.
You gotta realize when we were integrated, when they integrated the schools, we were taught the same things that the Europeans were taught. Now, when you're talking about going to schools like Harvard and Yale for business, I'm sure they taught this stuff. So that's your 501k. So 501k, think daycare. K for kindergarten. Okay for kids. You know, kids are goats. Grand Rising and Arthur Gray. We're going over the 501c's, So we covered the 501c29, 501e, we covered the 501d, we covered the 501f, the 501j, the 501k, which is your daycare centers. Now we're on to the 501n, which are your charitable risk pools that pool insurable risk of its members, which are tax-exempt charities. Do you ever notice there's a lot of double talk? Charitable risk pools that pool insurable risk of its members, which are tax-exempt charities. Due division says, in Texas, we have child care management services that interlink with Medicare and Medicaid. So your 501n, charitable risk pools that pool insurable risk. So basically, it's a cooperative that pools the insurable risk of its members, which are tax-exempt charities. So this is basically another version of reinsuring the insured to relieve them of or to reduce some of the risk so that they stay solvent. So it's another tax-exempt entity to take on the load of a tax-exempt entity and take care of its members. That's your 501n. Let's look at the 521a. So we go from a 501n to a 521a. So we're leaving the 501 series. So we had everything from a 501.29 to a 501c29 to a 501n. Doodle Vision says it's a bumper to bumper full warranty. Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, that's how you make a profit for all them years, never taking losses.
The more I learn about these nonprofits and tax-exempt statuses, the more things start to make sense. I'm sure I'm not the only one. We're actually getting a glimpse of how cities, states, and this country is ran. 521A is a farmers cooperative associations that market its member farmers products at market rates, market purchases at wholesale rates, and remit earnings to member farmers. Doodle Vision says 501s never take an L, so they never have to bounce back. Exactly. So 521A is farmers cooperative associations that market its members farmers products, make purchases at wholesale rates, and remit earnings to member farmers. LJ Free says, we've got to know what game is being played, who's at the table, and know the rules. Otherwise, the keep away game continues and and it's up to our children to try to figure it out. Exactly. So a 521A is a farmers cooperative association that markets its members farmers products at the market rate. So it markets the members farmers products at the market rate. So you're talking about potatoes, squash, whatever. At the market, it markets them at the market rate, which means retail. And then it makes purchases at wholesale rates. And then remits the earnings to the member farmers. So basically it does the marketing for them, sells it at retail as they buy it at wholesale, and then the profits get remitted to the members. That's
Farm
right.
subsidies.
Say again. What was that?
Some of them farm subsidies to me.
Yeah, that's exactly what they are. Farm subsidies. So your 521As are your farm subsidies. In some instances, farmers are being paid not to farm, or paid to farm certain things, or paid to give the land a break so that they can farm in 3 or 4 years. Doodle Vision says that 501 is like the monkey of the hangover. Him, the middleman. Mr. TJ says, and they just got a nice bag. Well, the good news is now they're not the only ones that know what the bag is.
That's it.
So
Breaking it down so you know what it is and how to apply it.
So the next one is a 527 political organization. So your 527. So this is still your tax exempt status, classified under under the 501Cs, but now instead of it being a 501C, it's a 527. This is where things can get really interesting. So it's time to put your hard hats on, ladies and gentlemen. Your 527 are your political organizations that operate primarily to raise or spend money to influence the selection, nomination, election, or appointment of any individual to any federal, state, or local public office, such as political parties, political action committees, and super PACs.
One more time, please. I know it's a lot. Just one more.
527 nonprofit tax-exempt entities are political organizations that operate primarily to raise or spend money to influence the selection, nomination, election, or appointment of any individual to any federal, any state, or any local public office, such as political parties, Democratic and Republican, political action committees, and super PACs. And Antonio says, unsurprisingly. Someone say Yahtzee. So let's look at the definitions of these political organizations, shall we? Doodle Vision says National Action Network. So a 527 organization or 527 group is a type of U.S. tax-exempt organization organized under Section 527 of the U.S. Internal Revenue Code. A 527 group is created primarily to influence the selection, nomination, election, appointment, or defeat of candidates to federal, state, or local public office. Technically, almost all political committees, including state, local, and federal candidate committees, traditional political action committees, super PACs, and political parties are 527s. However, in common practice, the term is usually applied only to such organizations that are not regulated under state or federal campaign finance laws because they do not expressly advocate for the election or defeat of a candidate or party. There are no upper limits on contributions to 527s and no restrictions on who may contribute. There are no spending limits imposed on these organizations. The organizations must register with the Internal Revenue Service publicly, disclose their donors, and file periodic reports of contributions and expenditures. Because they may not expressly advocate for specific candidates or coordinate with any candidate's campaign, many 527s are used to raise money to spend on issue advocacy and voter mobilization. Example of 527s are Swift Boat Veterans for Truth, Texans of Truth, the Media Fund, American Come Together, the Progress for American Voter Fund, the Secretary of State Project. Wow, this got everybody's attention. So, with that being said, I'm gonna read a little bit more. Alchemy, you're absolutely right. Slick ain't even a word for it. So let's look into a little bit of the legal history. The Internal Revenue Code Section 527 was enacted as part of the Public Law number 93-625 on January 3, 1975, in the case of Buckley versus Vallejo. The U.S. Supreme Court attempted to draw a line on the extent of which campaign finance laws could regulate speech about politics. The court's answer was that campaign finance laws could reach only party and candidate committees, organizations with the major purpose of electing candidates, or speech that expressly advocated the election or defeat of candidates. The determination of whether a group had the major purpose of electing candidates depended in turn on whether express advocacy was the group's primary activity. In footnote 6 of the Buckley opinion, the court limited express advocacy to words and phrases such as Smith for Congress, elect, defeat, or other specific cause for action to vote for or against candidates. Thus, organizations could run ads discussing candidates and issues without being subject to campaign finance restrictions, so long as they avoided such express advocacy. Y'all hearing this? The McCain-Feingold Law, also known as the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act, extended certain campaign finance limitations to broadcast advertisements run within 60 days of the general election or 30 days of the primary election if they mention a candidate, regardless of whether or not they contain express advocacy. The Supreme Court upheld the constitutionality of this provision in McConnell versus Federal Election Commission. Based on the decision, many persons argue that Federal Election Commission, FEC, to use its regulatory power to extend campaign finance laws to cover these groups. The Commission held hearings in April 2004 to determine whether or not 527 should be regulated under campaign finance rules, but concluded that the law did not cover these independent 527 organizations unless they directly advocated the election or defeat of a candidate or engaged in broadcasting advertising mentioning with the 30 to 60 day windows specified by Congress in McCain-Feingold law. Nevertheless, Federal Election Commission rulings after the 2004 election attempted to extend the reach of law to advertisement which questioned the candidate's character and fitness for office off limits to 527s specifically. So what does this mean? It means that 501c4s, 5s, and 6s can donate to 527s in help of raising money. The nonprofit is public. The individuals in that nonprofit that donate to those 501c4s, 5s, and 6s still maintain their anonymity as long as they're not expressing advocacy or defeat. So basically, it's a loophole within a loophole, as you would call it. So the 501c4, 5, and 6s are named as who donated and how much, but the individuals that donated to them are still able to remain anonymous. Next question.
Oh,
I got a question.
What's up?
I posed this question earlier.
Okay.
What do the 501Cs do for the Indian? What could they do for the Indian? What is this information? Why is this information necessary for the Indian?
Well, not only is it necessary for the Indian, but it's necessary for individuals, who want to help their community. The Indian community, it specifically can have a positive benefit because all of your registered, your federally recognized, your state recognized, and your locally recognized Indian tribes or Native American tribes are 501Cs. So they have access to create other 501Cs and get benefits specifically catered to them. But many of them don't even know that they have access to this because no one's telling them, or they don't think they qualify, or they're not aware that they qualify. Many of these tribes are having problems with their constitution and bylaws because they don't understand the basic premise of how they operate and how they run. So if they're able to get their constitutions and bylaws in order, then they can get more recognition and then participate in these 501Cs and become more self-sufficient and not have to rely on the government, which basically means they can help their families for the next 7 generations. And then you couple that with the HUD Section 3, Section 9, and the USDA grants. The sky's the limit for them or anybody else. Grand Rising, Marlon P.
Peace, peace.
Does that answer your question?
Oh, your hard hat zone. Hard hat zone.
So the 527s are your political organizations. So let's look at political parties. Because your political parties fall under your 527s. Indigenous Intelligence says, State told me I got to incorporate my LLC to become nonprofit. My question is, if it's a single member LLC, would I have to issue with my article of incorporation being acceptable since I'm incorporating alone? Yeah, because in order for you to have a 501c entity, you have to have at least 3 board members that are voting, and you cannot be one of the voting members. Now you can sit on the governance side of the house as a non-voting member, meaning as an officer, like a treasurer or president or vice president, but you could not be a voting member of your nonprofit. So you would have to find 3 people that you trust to sit on your board of directors who will be your voting body, and then you would be able to turn your LLC into a nonprofit and apply for tax exemption. So hopefully that helps.
There we go.
So political party. A political party is an organized group of people who have the same ideology or who otherwise have the same political positions and who field candidates for elections in an attempt to get them elected and thereby implement the party's agenda. While there is some international commonality in the way political parties are recognized and in how they operate, there are often many differences and some are significant. Many political parties have an ideological core, but some do not. And many represents ideologies very different from their ideology at the time the party was founded. Many countries such as Germany and India have several significant political parties, and some nations have a one-system party such as China and Cuba. The United States is in practice of a two-party system, but with many smaller parties also participating in a high degree of autonomy from individual candidates. So then it goes into political factions. And I am not going to read all this. Just basically gives you the breakdown of how the political parties got started, their emergence. This might be interesting. It gives you a history of the parties. Then it says, now I will read this. It says, I'll put this in the chat. Sorry for my apologies for not putting it in earlier, so y'all know where I'm reading from. It says, although the framers of the 1787 United States Constitution did not anticipate the American political discourse would become partisan, political controversies in the early 1790s over the extent of federal government powers saw the emergence of the two proto-political parties, the Federalist Party and the Democratic Republic Party, which were championed by Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson, respectively. However, a consensus reached on these issues ended political politics in 1816 for nearly a decade, a period commonly known as the Era of Good Feelings. The splintering of the Democratic Republican Party in the aftermath of the contentious 1824 presidential election led to the reemergence of political parties. The two major parties would dominate the political landscape for the next quarter century. The Democratic Party led by Andrew Jackson and the Whig Party established by Henry Clay from the National Republicans and from other anti-Jackson groups. When the Whig Party fell apart in the mid-1850s, its position as a major U.S. political party was filled by the Republican Party. I know there's Alexander Hamilton again. So let me read this. The second half of the 19th century saw adoption of the party model of politics across Europe in Germany, France, Austria, and elsewhere. An 1848 revolution sparked a wave of liberal sentiment and the formation of representative bodies and political parties. The end of the century saw the formation of large socialist parties in Europe, some conforming to the teaching of Karl Marx, others adapting social democracy through the use of reformist and gradualist methods. At the same time, the political party reached its modern form with their membership discipline through the use of the whip or the party whip and the implementation of efficient structures of control. The Home Rule League Party, campaigning for Home Rule for Ireland in the British Parliament, was fundamentally changed by the Irish political leader Charles Stewart Parnell in the 1880s. In 1882, he changed his party's name to the Irish Parliamentary Party and created a well-organized grassroots structure, introducing members to replace ad hoc informal groupings. He created a new selection procedure to ensure the professional selection of party candidates committed to taking their seats, and in 1884, he imposed a firm party pledge which obligated MPs to vote as a bloc in Parliament on all occasions. The creation of a strict party whip and a formal party structure was unique at the time. This party efficient structure and control contrasted with the loose rules and flexible informality found in the main British parties. They soon came to model themselves on the Parnellite model. So it goes on to talks about the structures. So he said the whole system is a lie and completely broken from its inception, but we still buying it. Well, Antonio, at the end of the day, that it can be looked at as a lie, but here's a question. Who told us a lie? Because if you think about it, what lie have we been told? Because this information has been here for a while. We just haven't been privy to it. So were we being told a lie, or was the truth being omitted? And what I mean by that is, I've never heard a politician say that we were not Indians and that we were Africans. I've never heard a politician say and state that melanated people, African American, blacks, or whatever, could not start businesses or participate in nonprofit organizations. I have never heard an elected official of the government state that we should not have access to HUD 3, HUD Section 3, and those things. Normally, that rhetoric comes from people that look like us. So who's been lying? And I'm not saying it from the standpoint of just jump on you, but I'm just something to think about. He said all people care about is reparations, which will end up being a $20 check. So here's the thing: you got to realize the way the government is structured, and the way the government does things. We will never be able to accuse them of lying, because the question that they ask is, "What did we lie to you about?" Because the government has never said that we weren't Indians. They use organizations to say that. They use organizations to say that the Aztecs and the Mayans disappeared and nobody knows what happened to them. They never said it. Grand Rising, Creek running water.
Peace, Creek.
So when
Yeah, man.
And Antonio, I'm not saying this is what you're saying, because I understand your point. So when we start making accusations that the government lied, we have to be able to find out exactly what they lied about. Because they put things in place. These organizations who created our books and created our infrastructures were allowed to do so only because of these nonprofit organizations and these unions who had these ability to vote and influence legislature. So it wasn't the politicians. It was people.
Because how you say, the system isn't the problem. It's our ancestor system. It's the people. It's the people within the system lies the problem.
Micaiah Bryan says, if I may, if it is a lie, then we just have to get our hands dirty and clean it up. And it's not even about getting our hands dirty, but it is about getting it cleaned up. And Dennis Johnson said, they didn't lie. My daddy never had a job. My stepmom said, you just gotta read. So here, it's one of those situations. All this information is being right in front of our faces. We just had too many distractions. We were looking in the wrong places. We were being influenced by people that looked like us, that we thought that were on our sides, while the government just stood by and just watched it all happen. And if you've been paying attention to what's going on in the politics and what 45 is doing, the American Indians are catching it. As soon as he got in office, he approved to have that pipeline run straight through their land. A lot of them have been indicted for claiming that they live on a reservation and then not even living in the United States. So before we start accusing the government of lying, which is a huge accusation, we got to come with some receipts.
Mm-hmm. Also, remember how many political figures on tape didn't say who we were. Like TMA said, they never denied who we were from all the institutions that keep you away.
And in 1970, when it comes to the census, we were allowed to self-identify.
Bingo.
I'm going to say it again. For census purposes, in 1970, we were allowed to self-identify. So if we were allowed to self-identify, then whose responsibility is it to tell the census who we are? Is it the government's responsibility, or is it our responsibility? I'm just asking. Because if we're going to take the stance, and I'm not talking to anybody specifically, but if we're going to take the stance and accuse the government of lying and hiding information, we better be able to prove it. He said, y'all made me politely ask somebody to essentially shut up because I was trying to listen. They walking up trying to talk to me about the stock market. Sorry, but I'm really trying to listen to this.
Yeah, Mr. TJ, you can still self-identify ever since 1970, but you're still going to have something to back it up to prove who you are. You got a right to identify as a toaster oven if you want to.
but you need to prove it. Mikhail Brown said let me say the elders were so busy to integrate until they said forget about the self identity. Well, you got to realize that we are a people that are easily influenced by who we deem as credible. You look at the different leaders that we chose, and some of those statements that they were making, and some of the statements that they were claiming. We were determined to be African American until 1988, when Jesse Jackson went on Capitol Hill to say that we should be called African American. But it didn't even become a selection until 2000, which basically
because they had to wear it on you to make you want to become African American.
Right.
Rodney King, O.J. Simpson. Go back and revisit these timelines. 1970, able to self-identify. What happened? I'm black and I'm proud and all this. Come on, man.
The Black Power movement. The black fists in the air that doing the Olympics. It was all a means and a mechanism to trick us, if you will, to persuade. That's the term I'm going to use. Persuade you into thinking that you are something that you weren't. So even though we weren't lied to, we were persuaded by our own people.
And didn't they say that's what the Indian agent was? Their job was to persuade us to take on a European culture, European ways.
That's exactly what it was. Yeah, the Congressional Black Caucus. That is a non-profit organization. Yeah, persuade is a better choice than lie, because at the end of the day, if we're gonna accuse the government of something, we need to come with facts. Tricky. Bamboozle.
Yes, that's what it means. Yeah, a lot of us didn't know where to look it up, but that's why we're here trying to do our part to make sure that this information is out there and stay out there for our people.
Exactly.
So them long times of hunting or guessing. I'm gonna say it again. The days with blindfolds on throwing darts at the map are over. We're going to the map and putting the dart on where we're trying to go and where we will be going.
Yeah. So I guess it's about that time to set the record straight. You think, Bounce?
Uh-oh.
Be nice. It's not that bad.
Yeah, you just setting the record straight. That's all, right?
Yeah, setting the record straight. That's what we do. Stop it.
Y'all know this is the time to where we dedicate to setting the record straight on anything that we probably misrepresented, misquoted, anything that's going on that's out of place, taken out of context, and so on, and so on, and so on.
So for the record, I want to go on record and say, here's the situation. Autonomous Assembly's whole purpose is to help those individuals who want to find out if they're Indian and have Indian in their family. If you are, and we help you find out that you are Indian by helping you with your genealogy, and then after you find you do your genealogy, we tie you into your tribe. That does not mean you have to leave if your tribe is located somewhere that you're not. That does not mean that if you are located somewhere that your tribe are, that you got to go live on the reservation registration. What that means is you are affiliated with them and you are associated with them because your surname is in their records, which basically means that your ancestors tied into that tribe, which basically means you tied to that tribe. And then the next goal after that is to help that tribe. Now, should said tribe not want to be affiliated with our ancestors and they want to keep the melanated ancestors away, then there are mechanisms in place that they will have to deal with. Not meaning that we will use those mechanisms to force them, but If you're bigoted and you're racist, then that's something you're gonna have to deal with. We don't want to
We
deal
got
with
we got
any
time for that.
Indians, right? We don't want to deal with any Indians or Native Americans that don't want to be bothered with us. But we will tell.
Yeah.
you
We
you
do
will
have
get
time.
told on, because
Yeah.
there's no time for that, because we gotta stay on
How
target.
many other How many other tribes had this kind of viewpoint? Got sued for it.
There were three tribes, and they're three of the civilized tribes. Go figure, right? So civilized that they're racist, that have been sued and have lost.
So civilized at their race.
So there's already court cases to you know to put that in perspective and put that out there. So we're not here to beg for anything from any tribe. We're just here to help people connect who are in their communities, connect with their tribes based off of genealogy and the surnames and the genealogists that are on those tribes. So at the end of the day, if you do right, things will get right. If not, you're going to get left. We are not here as a Tax-exempt assembly to tell you who you are or who you are not. We are not here to debate with you. We are not here to argue with you. We are not here to demean or ridicule. We do not consider ourselves the autochthonous police or anything like that. We do present information.
No.
We do present information that's going to make you think. And if we see something that could potentially be a problem, we're going to voice it, because we would want someone to do that for us. Say, for instance, when it comes down to the nonprofits and the HUD, if there was something in those codes or in those nonprofits that could potentially put me in jail or my family in jail or any one of you in jail, we would all want to know about it, wouldn't we?
I would want to know.
Okay.
My door kicked in.
Listen, y'all, I better not find out y'all knew and didn't tell me.
Just painted my door.
So with that being said, we will only present information, or we will only present information that will warn you or expose you to some pending danger or some pending reward. So with that being said, last Wednesday, somebody in the panel asked me about UCC codes. And we did some research on UCC codes. And I regret to inform those individuals that are either contemplating using UCC codes or are using UCC codes to, I guess for lack of a better term, remove debt, that the state attorney's office has issued documentation to every state to penalize those individuals who are doing that. People that are using UCC codes are on the FBI's radar.
Yes, we're just passing a warning out. Yes. We'll be breaking what we say Friday. We'll be breaking this information down.
Mm-hmm. There are cases where individuals have received up to 10 years in jail for what they call fraudulent use of UCC codes. And they even break down why these UCC codes and this UCC information has been able to remain on the books. And it's not because the individual that are using these codes erroneously are correct. It's because of a loophole that they found. So, if you are using UCC codes to remove debt or to place liens on individuals, or to place lien on property, I would highly encourage you to stop doing so, because what you're doing is creating a paper trail. There will be a video on the Tax-exempt Assembly that will basically provide that information to you as far as what should and should be done with it. As a matter of fact,
yeah, it's uploading now, so time the alert should go out time to get finished uploading. I got it on Premiere.
So again, for those that are David Corey said you in trouble. Well, at the end of the day, David Corey, it's one of those situations to where it does have some. The purpose of the UCC codes are basically mechanisms for contracts when it comes to loans and, for lack of a better term, collateral. And the UCC codes and the being able to declare these UCC codes valid or invalid was a mechanism used so that people could dispute the validity. The problem is if the dispute is false or fraudulent, it still has to be reported by law. So the Secretary of State is in works to start changing those laws, so where if it is deemed that these UCC codes or these UCC submissions are fraudulent, they're going to be ignored. In some states, they are considered felonies for doing so, and you can receive time. So we will release that information so people can know exactly what's going on with that. Matter of fact, let me see if I can pull it up, because truth be told, this is more serious than being placed on a black identity extremist list, because they have policies and procedures on how to deal with it per state. So for those that have purchased these instructions on how to write these UCC codes, there are policies and procedures to combat that. That's how serious this is. And every state has been informed. So I'm not saying this to deter or to upset or irritate anybody. I'm saying this because this is something that's real, it's something that's serious, and it's something that people should know. And I don't think anybody would want to be intentionally or unintentionally incarcerated because they thought they was doing something that was legal. Bones, you got anything you want to add to that while I look for this document?
No, just basically just adding on to more what you said. Just sharing information to make sure people are aware of what's going on and what are the consequences of it. Because I, for one, believe that people are trying to just find a way out or find solutions, and sometimes do jump on certain things because it sounds like it's the best thing going for them. So at a Thompsonist Assembly, like we say, when we come across information, we make it our responsibility to share it to the communities, just to make people aware. Now, at the end of the day, it's up to you as an individual to pick and choose what it is you're going to do. We're just doing our part by informing you with the information.
Exactly. So Randy James says, can you speak on getting a cert of live birth authenticated?
Well, I can tell you this much. That is one of the categories that the FBI is tracking. Like I said, it'll be in a video that's uploaded today, and we'll be going in detail Friday's Rising show. But it's a lot of important information to break down.
Yeah. So if you want a copy of the, it's called State Strategies to Subvert Fraudulent Uniform Commercial Code UCC Filings. I downloaded the PDF, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go back to this original place and see if I can put the link in there so everybody can have access to it. Antonio says, now I gotta go apologize to somebody because of y'all. His feelings probably were all hurt. Let me see. Give me a second. I'll be able to send that link to you so you'll actually have it, because it's very detailed and it's very specific, and they're not playing. They are attaching UCC code filings. They are attaching this to.
My phone's in the center console.
attaching these UCC
Oh yeah, that's it.
codes filing
Like,
to the actual what's the best way to put it? Sovereignty movement.
Yeah, the FBI. Yeah, when you do that, they automatically have it attached to that. They know since 2013.
Actually, it's since they've been working on this since 2002. This has been a problem. Every year it increases. So this is nothing to play with. Like I said, it's more serious than being put on the black identity extremist list.
oh, that was good. Dominic was up at like 5:30.
Yeah, the link is posted in the chat.
And it's called State Strategies to Subvert Fraudulent Uniform Commercial Code Filings.
No, because the UCC codes, David Corey, is not about correcting your status. That's the misinformation. So like I said, they accept it because on that end, they just supposed to accept the paperwork and file it in the Federal Registry. It does not mean it's legal or binding. That's the misconception.
All right, so I'm going to read what a UCC code is, and I'll put the link in there as well.
I guess we touching a little today then.
Yeah, so I mean, you asked for some, at least gonna give it to you. We are setting the record straight, right? It says, what is the Uniform Commercial Code? It says, anyone who has ever purchased a business or personal vehicle has most likely signed a UCC-1 statement as part of the transaction. The purchase of a car with a loan from a bank or financial entity is a good example of a Uniform Commercial Code transaction. A UCC-1 is filed and the title is kept by the lender until the loan is paid off. So what is a Uniform Commercial Code? A Uniform Commercial Code, their laws are established to regulate sales of personal property and other business transactions. For example, the transactions such as borrowing money, leasing equipment or vehicles, setting up contracts, and selling goods are all covered by the Uniform Commercial Code. The sale of services and the purchase of real estate is not a UCC transaction. It says the UCC laws were set up and are maintained by the National Conference of Commission of Uniform State Laws, also known as the Uniform Law Commission, which is a non-profit organization. You see that? Each state has adopted its own slightly different but basically the same version of the Uniform Commercial Code. While most states have adopted the 9 basic articles and procedures, California has its own articles. And there are sections of the Uniform Commercial Code. The balance small business explains these sections in more depth, but here briefly are the sections of the Uniform Commercial Code. So you have Article 1 is general provisions, Article 2 sales and lease, Article 3 negotiable instruments, Article 4 bank deposits, Article 5 letters of credit, Article 6 bulk sales, Article 7 warehouse receipts, bills of lading, and other documents of title, Article 8 investment in securities, Article 9 secure transaction for personal property, agricultural liens, promissory notes, consignments, and security interests. The Uniform Commercial Code was set up to make it easier for business in different states to do business with each other. You can find a list of the different versions of the UCC in each state of the website from Cornell Law School. Most Uniform Commercial Code transactions involve secured property, financed by a bank or lender with the title of the property held by the lender as security until the loan is paid off. So the UCC codes has absolutely nothing to do from this document with correcting your status. Now, what has been happening based off of the information that was provided per that link is that what people are doing is they have these loans and they are correcting their status, if you will, and then stating that they are no longer obligated to pay those debts because they are no longer under the United States jurisdiction. So by correcting their status, they're also defaulting on these loans and then filing these UCC claims. Hopefully that makes sense. So again, This information is not to make anybody look bad or feel bad, but we're just putting this information out to share it. I'm sure there could be ways that using these UCC codes can be very beneficial, but I haven't seen a situation where using these codes was beneficial long term and was able to help any individual, I guess for lack of a better term, be a sovereign citizen. So that don't mean it hasn't happened. I just haven't seen it. So again, if you have some proof, please provide it. Because if I'm wrong, if we're wrong, we're wrong. Dave, of course, says, can I change my nationality with Social Security Office and their vital records? To answer that question, I don't know. Now, when you change your nationality, you talk about declaring yourself as American Indian or declaring yourself as part of a tribe. I don't know what you mean by changing your nationality.
Yeah, because if you're turning into a tribe, yeah, you don't got to do that.
So that I would need more information to answer that question, David. And also too, when it says because you had also put earlier, status means nationality. Based off of what documentation, who are you submitting that information to? So as far as self-determination and status correction are two different things. Self-determination is for census purposes only.
That's it.
That's all that self-determination is for. It's for the census only. So when you fill out your census paperwork, if you choose to fill out your census paperwork, they give you the opportunity to identify yourself so resources can be allocated. Period, point blank in the discussion. So if you are changing your nationality according to the census, self-determination is a way to do it. If you're going to be correcting your status, then you need proof of your nationality, if that's what you're asking for. So how would you get proof of that? Well, you'd have to have tie to your tribe, and they'd have to vouch for you. It'd be no different, I would think, than someone finding out that they're from Iran and they want to be declared, or they want to have Iranian citizenship or dual citizenship. They would have to be able to go back into their genealogy to prove that they have family from Iran. And then that family would have to be like, yeah, your family ties into our family, so yeah, you're one of us. Because if you don't tie back into them, then it's very hard for them to say that you're one of us, if that makes sense.
Yeah, if you're talking about on the census, from Negro and stuff like that, yeah, that's self-determination. If you're talking on the census, where they will have your people labeled as Negro or this or that.
That's census, and that's dealing with the resources that are allocated per state, per county, per region. So as far as changing your status internationally or from a standpoint of being recognized by other nations as a certain nationality outside of tying into your tribe, I do not know how to do that. And I'm not saying that tying into your tribe is the only way to get your status corrected or to be recognized by other nations. I'm just saying that's the only way that I know. So if someone has another way and it's proven to work and it's still working, then by all means, please bring that information.
Mm-hmm.
We're not saying that our way is the only way or this way is the only way. This is the only way we know that works, if that makes sense.
And it seems like what happens a lot is people are taking information on multiple topics and mashing it into one. Because the census and the UCC codes have nothing to do with each other. Totally separate entities with totally separate purposes.
So hopefully we were able to help with that information. I dropped the link to the to what the Secretary of State has to say about the UCC code filings and it be considered fraud.
Oh, and also look up the Federal Registry to realize that when you submit the documents, it's forever on file like that, so they already have it and they know who's doing it.
So I'm posting it again. It's called The State Strategies to Subvert Fraudulent Uniform Commercial Code UCC Filings. And the only reason I put this in here was because someone asked me about the UCC codes and why don't we use them on Wednesday when we was talking about nonprofits. So I'm not coming for anybody. I'm not looking to start anything with anybody. I'm just trying to expose people to information. So
Answering the question, that's it.
Filling in blanks.
So if this is fraudulent, then, by all means.
The choices is your choice to make at the end of the day. Just informing you.
Free says, Jess Bones, I hear that mash work constantly being done. Makes it confusing to unravel what is really being said.
No problem, Big Hawk. Somebody should be, if you sent the email, you should be getting to respond today.
So that was all I have for this segment of Set the Record Straight. Does anybody else have anything that they want to say or add to the UCC codes and things of that nature? He said, y'all ain't set the record straight on where Al shopped it from either, y'all. Know what? He says, no, without looking it up. Antonio, I really don't care where Al Sharpton is from. So, I mean,
he is in demand. He really want to know where he's from.
So let back here try where Al Sharpton from. I said it.
Antonio says he an agent, literally. I mean, if he is, he might be. I mean, he got his own show. He says you would come into the room, changing the rules of the game. I know, right? So let's that should be all we have, right, fellas? Y'all got anything y'all want to say? I mean, I pretty much said all I need to say.
None I can think to add on to it.
So, oh, Antonio says, my bad, I'll fall back. Oh, now you want to fall back. Okay. So, hopefully this information has been educational. It's giving you something to look up, do some research on, give you some things that you can start doing today. Realizing that these nonprofit and tax-exempt entities, how they're intertwined, how they're commingled, how they work together, how they support the state, how they support the government, how they support communities, how they can support us. So, the goal is to expose you to this information so that you may do something in your community today. So hopefully we did that. And that's all I have. Got anything else, Bones, before we end? Or no sell out?
My bad, I couldn't get to the mute fast enough. Email us if you have any questions, concerns, comments, anything. Conscienceassembly@gmail.com. I put it in the chat. Have a grand day.
Bones, anything that you'd like to say before we head on out?
Oh, that's y'all about to said it all. Just looking forward to when we start reporting on a lot of these applications and start showing people how they can apply these nonprofits and this information that we bring into the forefront. Just looking forward to the next steps.
Well said. So, as always, it's a pleasure being able to speak with you this grand rising and every rising before, and hopefully every one after. We look forward to seeing you at 8 a.m. tomorrow, correct? Yeah, 8 a.m., right?
Yep.
All right. So, on that note, we hope y'all have a great day.
See you on the next Rising Show. Peace.
Peace, y'all.